Hey everyone, I wanted to wait until the weekend was over before posting this because I wanted to give you all a chance to watch Black Adam. But now that plenty of you have, I wanted to make it official that I am back as Superman.
Ever since the original film's release back in June of 2013, fans have been anxiously awaiting a sequel to Man of Steel. The starting point of DC's shared cinematic universe, commonly referred to as the DCEU, Man of Steel has garnered an interesting legacy in the 9 years since it was first released. In the decade after it graced the big screens, this movie remains something of a polarising take on Superman for many fans, with some believing it's a brilliant modern translation of how an all-powerful figure would exist in today's world, while others deem it to lack the joy and vibrancy of the character's comics and the previous cinematic incarnations. Regardless though, pretty much non-stop since 2013, fans in both camps have been eagerly anticipating a sequel. And although 2016's Batman v Superman continued director Zack Snyder and writer David Goyer's story, it wasn't the true Superman-centric follow-up that fans had hoped for. In more recent years, it appeared that all hope had been lost. Following the dismal theatrical release of Justice League in 2017 and a change of leadership within Warner Bros., it seemed like actor Henry Cavill's days playing the iconic superhero were over, as the character became relegated to faceless cameos and other iterations of the Man of Tomorrow were being developed by the studio. However, all of that appears to have changed recently, as following Warner Bros.' merger with Discovery, the return of Cavill and the production of a new Superman film appears to be a top priority, with Black Adam seemingly paving the way for a whole new generation of storytelling for the last son of Krypton. So in this video, I want to discuss how I think Warner Bros. And DC Films should approach a potential Man of Steel 2, highlight a number of beloved stories from comic books and animated films that I think could serve as a good inspiration for the movie's plot, and address the important themes and ideas that should be at the heart of the next great Superman story. Before we continue though, just a quick reminder to leave a like on this video if you enjoy it, and subscribe to Owen Likes Comics so you don't miss out on any future videos. In order to explain how I think Warner Bros. Should approach a Man of Steel sequel and the types of stories I believe they should consider adapting, I think it's first important to outline the behind-the-scenes factors that influenced the original film's development, as well as some of the other ideas for follow-up films that were proposed in the years since. The production of what would become Man of Steel began back in 2008, following the collapse of a sequel to Superman Returns. After entertaining a pitch from director Matthew Vaughn and comic book writer Mark Millar, who together proposed a trilogy of films that would span the Man of Tomorrow's entire lifetime and even suggested future Daredevil actor Charlie Cox for the role, the studio hired David S. Goyer, fresh off the success of The Dark Knight, to pen the screenplay. In October 2010, Zack Snyder, then best known as the filmmaker behind 300 and Watchmen, was hired to direct the film, and soon after, rumblings began about this movie being the starting point for an interconnected DC cinematic universe. Man of Steel ultimately paved the way for 2016's Batman v Superman and 2017's Justice League. However, plans for a standalone Superman film remained in place for some time. In August 2016, The Wrap reported that Man of Steel 2 was a top priority for the studio, with rumours of both Matthew Vaughn and Christopher McQuarrie being considered to direct the film. Very little progress was actually made on any of these ideas though, and despite the studio offering the film to James Gunn following his controversial firing from Marvel in 2018, the filmmaker instead chose to develop a new version of the Suicide Squad. By this time, Justice League's disastrous theatrical release had seemingly set the DC Extended Universe back to square one, with the then DC Films president Walter Hamada steering the studio into focusing on self-contained and standalone projects instead of wider interconnected films. The success of movies like Joker, which was produced under this doctrine, led them to explore alternative takes on the Man of Tomorrow, eventually hiring J.J. Abrams and Ta-Nehisi Coates to develop an all-new take on the hero with a brand new actor in the role. Despite this though, all hope wasn't lost. You see, following the merger between Warner Brothers and Discovery, the prospect of a Henry Cavill-led Superman film has seemingly been reborn. Not only have notable figures within the company such as new president and CEO David Zaslav proclaimed Superman to be a central figure in their potential success, but Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson had vocally campaigned for the Man of Tomorrow to appear in Black Adam, with Cavill making his triumphant return to the big screen in a post-credit sequence to confront the notorious anti-hero. The following week, Cavill took to social media to formally announce his return, as reports of a new Superman film being in development intensified. For the first time in years, the big screen future of The Last Son of Krypton seems exciting. After 5 years of appearing exclusively in headless cameos, DC's flagship superhero may once again be able to show the world just what makes him one of the most beloved superheroes of all time. But as exciting as Superman's future might be, I think in order to determine what could come next, we have to look at the character's past, specifically the 84 years worth of comic books and animated films that could help inspire the story of Man of Steel 2. When highlighting some of the existing stories that Warner Brothers can use when developing Man of Steel 2, I'm going to divide them into 3 sections. This section will perhaps be the most straightforward, discussing comics and animated films that could build off Superman's return in Black Adam and see the hero face off against both Adam and Shazam. The first comic I want to discuss is All New Collector's Edition number 58 from May of 1978, which was the first crossover between Superman and Shazam. Written only 6 years after Shazam, then known as Captain Marvel, was licensed by DC after a lengthy legal battle with Fawcett Comics, this story was the hero's formal introduction into the DC universe, as he fights both against and alongside the last son of Krypton. Written by Jerry Conway with art by Rich Buckler, the comic sees the villainous sorcerer Karmang enlist Black Adam and the Quarmer to disguise themselves as Captain Marvel and Superman, attacking the other hero and setting up a trap that will lead to one killing the other. Black Adam and the Quarmer both travel to the other's Earth and ambush their respective foes, encouraging them to follow them back to exact revenge. Shockingly, Superman and Captain Marvel both fall for this, and an epic fight breaks out between the two heroes, before Supergirl and Mary Marvel are able to break it up and deduce that both heroes have been framed. With the four now united, the heroes work together to defeat both Black Adam and the Quarmer, before preventing Karmang's dastardly plan. While this comic is certainly a product of the Silver Age, it not only has historical significance as Superman's first encounter with both Shazam and Black Adam, but it also represented the ending of a decades-long rivalry and legal battles between DC and Fawcett. However, better quality stories between these three characters have been published in the years since. Namely, in 2006, Judd Winnick and Joshua Middleton told a 4-issue miniseries entitled Superman Shazam First Thunder. Set in the early days of the post-crisis DC universe, this series recounts the first canonical meeting between the Man of Tomorrow and the world's mightiest mortal. In this story, Superman pursues a group of thieves into Fawcett City, where Shazam intervenes after noticing the thieves using magic. After the two heroes work together, we see Clark and Billy bond as they discuss their various powers and rogues gallery, as a friendship blossoms between the two heroes. Meanwhile, we discover that Lex Luthor and Dr. Sivana are also working together, with the former having deduced that Shazam is actually the 11-year-old Batson. With this knowledge, Sivana sends a team of mercenaries to ambush and kill Billy at his home, only for Billy to transform into Shazam and stop them, but not before his best friend is killed. Overwhelmed by grief and rage, Shazam ambushes the mercenaries, and after discovering that Sivana hired them, almost kills his longtime foe before coming to his senses. Shazam then meets with Superman, where Billy reveals his secret identity and breaks down in front of Clark, questioning whether or not he's old enough and ready to wield this power. After comforting Billy, Superman confronts the wizard who granted him his powers, and berates the wizard for placing so much responsibility on a young boy. The wizard defends his actions, explaining that Billy was lost and all alone, and being Shazam has allowed him to find guidance and purpose. Understanding this, Superman returns to Forza and meets with Billy, now as Clark Kent, revealing his secret identity to the child and offering to become a friend and a mentor to the young superhero. Although this could be seen as more of a Shazam story than a Superman one, I think it's an excellent tale that outlines the ideals at each hero's core, as well as expertly showing us the compassion and sincerity within Superman. The notion of Superman and Shazam being allies was set up during the end of the first Shazam movie, so a follow-up film where Clark would act as a mentor to Billy, training him to use his powers responsibly and reflecting on his own struggles when first becoming a hero in Man of Steel could make for a very interesting film. It should be noted though that this comic actually served as an inspiration for the 2010 animated short Superman Shazam: The Return of Black Adam. Now, despite this film only running for 25 minutes, it sees Clark mentor a young Billy Batson after he's kicked out of his foster home and their two alter egos teaming up to fight Black Adam. Much like First Thunder, this film is a coming of age story for Shazam, as he's forced to choose between two paths to use his powers, represented by the altruistic Superman and the morally questionable Black Adam. This film would be an especially good story to adapt in either a sequel to Shazam, Black Adam, or even Man of Steel 2, as it could build off the pre-established friendship between Clark and Billy, as well as the growing tensions between Black Adam and Superman, telling a tale of the two coming to blows as Shazam is forced to step up and help Superman defeat this unstoppable force. Although the possibility exists that Man of Steel 2 could follow on from the end of Black Adam, there's also a wealth of solo Superman stories that I think could make for a great live-action film. In particular, there are 3 stories, each published in the 1980s, 90s and 2000s respectively, that I think could be turned into brilliant movies, and could continue the story of Henry Cavill's Superman and his evolution into the quintessential man of tomorrow. The first of these is 1985's For the Man Who Has Everything, by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. Perhaps best known as the creative team behind Watchmen, Moore and Gibbons crafted this marvellous one-shot story that was published in Superman Annual Issue 11. The story sees Batman, Robin and Wonder Woman visit Superman in the Fortress of Solitude for his birthday, where they discover the villain Mongul has attacked the hero. Mongul has unleashed the Black Mercy upon Superman, a plant that feeds off its host's life energy while making them dream their greatest desires. As the 3 heroes attempt to fight Mongul and save Clark, Superman sees a vision of what his life would be like had Krypton not been destroyed. While this dream is initially pleasant, as Kal-El is happily married and a father, we soon discover that Jor-El was disgraced after his prediction of Krypton's doom was disproved. As such, his father became alienated from society and became the leader of a radical terrorist group seeking to destroy Krypton. From this point onwards, Superman's vision devolves more into a nightmare, as Kal-El attempts to flee the planet with his son, while Jor-El's forces unleash an all-out war on the Kryptonian government. As the planet begins to implode, Kal-El starts to realise what he's witnessing isn't real, tearfully saying goodbye to his son as he snaps back into reality. Meanwhile, in the fortress, the heroes are able to pull the Black Mercy off of Clark before it latches onto Batman, with Robin freeing his partner while Superman defeats Mongul. Despite its somewhat unusual premise, For the Man Who Has Everything remains one of the most beloved Superman stories of all time. It's an incredible tale that calls back to the light-hearted joy of the Silver Age of comics, while also being deeply philosophical and psychological. It's worth noting that this comic has been adapted for television several times, most notably for a great episode of Justice League Unlimited, alongside episodes for the Krypton and Supergirl shows. Nevertheless, a feature film version of this story could be really great, enabling us to further explore the Krypton seen in Man of Steel, showcasing new perspectives of characters like Jor-El, Lara and Zod, as well as allowing for an exciting team-up between Superman, Wonder Woman and Batman, as the Trinity unite to stop Mongul. The next story from this period that I believe could make for a great film is 1998's Superman Peace on Earth. Co-written by Alex Ross and Paul Dini, with art by Ross, this one-shot graphic novel tells a generational Superman story, as the hero embarks on a humanitarian mission attempting to eradicate poverty and hunger worldwide. Superman's altruism is on full display in almost every page here. Throughout the comic, he travels the globe, interacting and helping everyday people, seeking to improve their lives by doing more than just fighting villains, aliens and monsters. For me though, the interesting aspect of this book is how Clark deals with the unexpected resistance to his efforts, as both world leaders and subsets of the population resent Superman's mission and attempt to sabotage him. I think this story could make for an interesting bridge between how people perceived Superman in films like Man of Steel and BVS and the more classical take on the character. Superman's mission in this comic is a truly noble one, and throughout it, we get to see him interact with real people and help them in ways greater than ever before, with some being truly touched and humbled by Clark's selflessness, while others choose to fear and resent him. This theme was already established in the previous films, but Peace on Earth brings with it a poignant message, with Superman accepting that even he can't single-handedly solve all of society's problems. And instead, Clark realises that his duty is to lead by example, inspiring others to help those around them and collectively make the world a better place. I believe that this idea is something that the next Superman movie should explore, both in Superman's relationship with the people of Metropolis and the principles that he stands to represent. Superman symbolises hope, optimism, and the dream of a better tomorrow. But how does that character fare in a world that refuses to dream, and instead has accepted and embraced cynicism? This premise is already built into the DNA of Cavill's version of Superman. However, I think the perfect story to conclude this arc would be Joe Kelly and Doug Mankey's What's So Funny About Truth, Justice and the American Way, first published in Action Comics issue 775. This one-shot story from 2001 is not only frequently described as one of the best Superman tales ever, but a brilliant character study of the last son of Krypton, and a reminder of why we still need his brand of selfless heroism. In this comic, Superman goes up against the Elite, a group of new, morally questionable vigilantes who win over the Metropolis public after killing a group of terrorists. The Elite's sudden popularity forces the Man of Steel to question his own morals and ideology, pondering whether his refusal to take lives is actually for the best. The story concludes with a high-stakes showdown between Superman and the Elite, where Clark shockingly kills each one before confronting the group's leader, Manchester Black. Believing that Superman has finally snapped and is about to kill him, Clark reveals that he tricked Black. The Elite are all alive and well and are awaiting arrest by the authorities. As Black processes this, Superman delivers a now iconic speech, explaining that he created an illusion of himself crossing the line to demonstrate the danger of this form of brutal and senseless justice. Black initially lambasts Superman, telling him that society has moved on from his ideals and that he lives in a dream, to which Superman responds by telling him that dreams save us and motivate people to transform themselves, and vows to never stop fighting until his dream of a world of peace is realised. What's so funny about Truth, Justice and the American Way is unquestionably one of the all-time great Superman stories. It contrasts the somewhat dated form of heroism that cynics believe Superman represents with a group of new characters that embody the nihilistic anti-hero trend that has emerged over the past few decades. While the Elite initially seem cool and more efficient than Superman, Clark eventually proves their methods to be reckless and not for the betterment of humankind, with the book's thesis being that true heroism isn't about excessive force, but helping others and inspiring those around you. The dreams monologue that Superman gives at the book's climax is one of my personal favourite moments in any comic book ever, and hearing Henry Cavill deliver this would, in my opinion, be the perfect culmination of his arc throughout the last decade of films. Although it's a relatively short comic, it was previously adapted into the feature-length animated film Superman vs. the Elite, which both expertly translated the brilliance of Kelly and Mankey's original story, but expanded upon it and turned it into a brilliant 80-minute saga. And I believe that Warner Bros. And DC could adopt a similar approach in turning this story into a feature film. Even though many of Superman's best comic book storylines exist in the character's past, there are still many incredible tales about the Man of Tomorrow being published today. Throughout the past 15 years in particular, several stories featuring the hero have been released that I think could make for great live-action films, and offer a more contemporary interpretation of the character. Released in 2006, Jeff Johns, Kurt Busiek and Pete Woods' Superman Up, Up and Away is a perfect example of this. Told throughout the pages of both Superman and Action Comics, this 8-part storyline focuses mainly on the Clark Kent side of the character, as he attempts to stop Lex Luthor, who wages a war on Metropolis using stolen Kryptonian weapons. The exciting wrinkle of this story is that Superman is almost entirely powerless here. In place of his flight, heat vision and invincibility, he has to fight his greatest enemy as a civilian, using his job at the Daily Planet as a way to prevent Lex's evil plan. Although Clark does regain his powers at the book's climax, where this story really excels is in its focus on the human side of Superman, and how he still remains a role model even once his extraordinary abilities are gone. The comic also places a heavy emphasis on Superman's supporting cast, such as his colleagues in the Daily Planet, and I believe a story of this manner could serve as a great character study for the Man of Steel, showcasing what he represents and why his mission remains necessary today. Likewise, Jeff Johns would continue to write the Superman title for several years, with arguably his best work on the series being his Brainiac saga. Throughout 2008, Johns and artist Gary Frank reinvented the long-running Superman villain, establishing that all previous incarnations of Brainiac were actually decoys and reintroducing the classic Silver Age version of the character. In addition to re-establishing one of Superman's greatest foes, the Bottle City of Kandor also plays a major role in this story, with Superman rescuing it from Brainiac's ship before teaming up with Supergirl to stop the villain from shrinking Metropolis. In my opinion, this arc is noteworthy for its emphasis on Superman reconnecting with the culture and history of Krypton. Not only is Brainiac introduced as the cause of Krypton's destruction, but Clark's alliance with Supergirl and the pair's rescue of Kandor gives the Man of Steel a much-needed connection to his homeworld. The story manages to balance the Kryptonian aspect of Superman's lore with his intrinsic bond with Earth and Metropolis, with Clark ultimately having to save the city from Brainiac's clutches. I think that Brainiac is a villain that is long overdue for a big screen adaptation, and this story represents everything that makes him such a compelling antagonist. Although this comic was a source of inspiration for the 2013 animated film Superman Unbound, I could still see it being a potential influence for the next Superman movie, especially given Supergirl's introduction in The Flash and Henry Cavill having previously commented about wanting to include Brainiac in a future project. However, a completely different direction for Superman that I would very much like to see on screen is the rebirth era of the character that began in 2016 and saw the introduction of Clark and Lois' son Jonathan Kent. While a young adult Jonathan is the current Superman in present-day comics, this period of the Man of Steel's comics focused on John as a young child as he first begins to develop his powers. With Clark and Lois relocating to Smallville, Superman trains his son to use his abilities and become Superboy, and the parental dynamic between them is an exciting change of pace from the traditional Superman status quo. This was arguably the biggest change to Superman's mythos since his infamous death 2 decades earlier, and is today looked back on as one of the best periods of the character's modern history. And seeing a film built around Clark becoming a father and seeing Superman through young John's eyes would be a brilliant new direction for the character on screen. The final and most recently released comic that I want to mention though is from 2019 in the form of Superman Up in the Sky by Tom King and Andy Kubert. Originally published as part of a Walmart exclusive comic, this is truly one of the best Superman stories of its generation. Essentially an anthology series, its 6 issues tell a tale of Superman journeying across space to rescue a missing girl, and chronicling all the adventures he goes on whilst desperately travelling across the stars. Although I have recently covered this book in its own video, I think Up in the Sky is a book worth highlighting when discussing the possible influences for the next Superman film. In addition to being a great story with a really poignant through line, Up in the Sky demonstrates so much of what makes Superman such an endearing character, whether it's his innate love of humanity and the lengths he will go to save one person, or his never say die attitude and ability to overcome even the most impossible of circumstances. Throughout the comic, the phrase "because you're Superman" becomes a recurring mantra for several different characters, and the incredible myth and legacy that Superman represents is used to demonstrate the impact that Clark has on those who believe in him. And this is an aspect of the Superman character is something I would love to see spotlighted in a live-action feature film. So with all of these different stories in mind, what are the common themes that run throughout them? And what core principles and ideas should be at the heart of the next Superman film? In my opinion, what makes a lot of these books so great is how they display Superman's connection and relationship to humanity. Now, this can be showcased in various different ways, by focusing on his dynamic with different characters, from Lex Luthor to Lois Lane, and from his biological son to a missing girl he's never even met. Superman is above all else a man of the people. He's a champion of the oppressed, and a hero created for those who feel overlooked and underrepresented in society. The product of two first-generation Jewish immigrants, Superman embodies the principles of the American dream. His mission of truth, justice, and a better tomorrow remains as relevant and necessary now as it did back in 1938. Additionally, many of these comics also further enhance the lore and mythos of the Man of Steel, forcing the hero to confront many different obstacles and new foes. Whether it's Brainiac, Mongol, the Elite, or Black Adam, seeing Superman go up against someone we've yet to see him clash with on screen would not only be an exciting visual, but would help differentiate these future films from anything previously done with the character on screen. I think in order for the next Superman film to succeed, regardless of whether it's titled Man of Steel 2 or something else, there are a few key things that Warner Bros. And DC Films need to keep in mind. In particular, I believe that it's paramount to hire the right people behind the scenes, be they directors or screenwriters, and entrust them to tell their stories without interference. Superman has a storied history in Hollywood, being the first superhero to ever receive a big budget motion picture. And throughout the past 4 decades since his cinematic debut, many filmmakers have treated us to different interpretations of the hero. Currently, several names are floating around for who could next step into the director's chair, from those previously linked to the project, such as Christopher McQuarrie and Matthew Vaughn, underrated storytellers like Joseph Kosinski or Jeff Nichols, superhero movie stalwarts like Sam Raimi and James Gunn, or even the return of Zack Snyder. There is no correct answer for who should write and direct the next film. However, I think the success of The Batman and the job that Matt Reeves did on that movie is something the studio should seek to replicate with their next series of Superman films. The Batman was not only a clearly defined vision, the product of a creator with both a deep love of the character and a unique idea of how to adapt him, but Reeves was allowed the freedom to shape both his iteration of the Dark Knight and his universe with next to no interference by the studio. Although Cavill's Superman remains deeply connected to the larger DCEU, the opportunity remains for a filmmaker to craft their own corner of this cinematic universe, one that embodies the hope, joy, and relatability that great Superman stories from comics, animation, and previous films have given us. As a longtime Superman fan anxiously anticipating his return to the big screen, I'm genuinely excited to see what the future holds for the last son of Krypton. In recent interviews since Black Adam's release, Henry Cavill has spoken extensively about his desire to bring back the hope and awe of the Man of Tomorrow, and create a new take on the character that both honours his incredible past and writes a new exciting chapter in his future. If this all goes to plan in the coming years, we as audience members may once again believe that a man can truly fly, and I sincerely hope that Man of Steel 2 is worth the decade of wait and gives us the Superman film that we've been wishing for. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to leave a like on this video and leave a comment down below as well. Let me know your thoughts on everything we talked about in today's video. I can't wait to hear what you have to say as always. If you're new to Owen Likes Comics, please make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notify bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. And if you enjoyed this video and you want some more, there should be some other videos on screen right now that you might also enjoy. If you want to help support the channel and help me make more videos, you can do so over at patreon.com/OwenLikesComics. Or if you just want some more of me, you can follow me on Twitter just at OwenLikesComics. But that's all for this video though. Again, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I'll see you next time. But until then, take care and keep reading.